Welcome to Chapter 3. We're going to talk about process costing here. So remember, process costing is when we are making large quantities of identical goods as opposed to job order costing where we were making small batches of customized goods. So in a job order cost system, we learned that we allocated the cost by job. In a process cost system, we're going to allocate the cost by step in the process. And then we'll calculate a cost per step in the process, and we'll use that to estimate how much work in process should be valued at based on how far along in the process it is. So again, this is just a summary of the differences in job order and process costing system. The big things that I want to point out is process costing is a repetitive process. So every time the goods go through this step of the process, it's exactly the same. So once we determine what the cost of this step is, it should be pretty much that amount every single time. So it's a repetitive process. It's a high volume process. Another difference that we have though is that remember in job order costing we had that one work in process control account and then we had the subsidiary ledgers. Well, in process costing we don't have subsidiary ledgers because we're not keeping track of cost by jobs, but we are going to have multiple work in process accounts. In fact, we're going to have a different work in process account for every step of the process. So if this is a 4-step process to get through, we'll have 4 work in process accounts. So I like this diagram where the top of it is showing us that job order costing. So work in process, materials, labor, and overhead are applied to the specific jobs, which are those subsidiary ledgers of work in process. And as the goods are completed, those jobs will move out of work in process into finished goods. And then as the job sells, we'll move it out of finished goods into cost of goods sold. But down here in the bottom, notice that we are going to be a new company called Puzzle Me. We're going to make like jigsaw puzzles. I don't know about your family, but my family has put together a lot of jigsaw puzzles during this pandemic quarantine time. And so we notice that we have 2 separate work in process accounts because making puzzles for Puzzle Me is a 2-step process. So we're going to apply materials, labor, and overhead to the assembly department. And then when those goods are finished with assembly, so finished with that step in the production process, they'll move into the cutting department where we will apply more materials, labor, and overhead. Then when they finish the cutting department, they move to finished goods and then ultimately to cost of goods sold when they sell. So the difference is, again, that we're going to have here 2 work in process accounts as opposed to just 1. So as we look at our 2 process accounts in the assembly department, or department 1, if you will, we have materials like the cardboard, the picture, and the glue. So in this department, they are gluing the picture to the cardboard. We have labor, which is the workers that are operating the pressing machines. And then our overhead is the maintenance and depreciation on those pressing machines. Once they are complete with respect to that department, then the puzzles, the picture glued to the cardboard, is moved to the cutting department. And at that point, they're cut and boxed and got ready to sell. So we'll add more direct materials like the box. We'll add labor, which is the workers operating the cutting machines. And then we have overhead, which is the maintenance and depreciation on the cutting machines. Then when they finish in the cutting department, they'll move on to finished goods. So our completed puzzles here is our finished goods account. So again, we've talked about this in chapter 2. We need to know the cost of our product so that we can set our sales prices. We need to know the cost of each step in the process so that we can calculate the balance for those work in process accounts, so that we know the total of the cost for finished goods and know how to calculate that balance, and know the cost of goods sold. But also we need to know the cost so that we can help control cost. So what this means is we we should know that, for example, the assembly department should cost X number of dollars to produce a puzzle. So we need to be monitoring that. And if we see that cost start to fluctuate, that could be a sign that there's a problem that we need to address. So we're going to use this as a control feature also.